Two guards physically drag a skeletal figure across the frozen ground, his legs refusing to support his own body weight. Fog quietly envelops the damp cobblestones of a military barracks courtyard in Charleroi on November 10, 1947. From the depths of a stone corridor, a raw, animalistic scream violently cuts through the freezing morning. It is exactly 7:29 in the morning, and the standard 12-man firing squad waits with loaded rifles. The condemned man wears a heavy coat hanging loosely off his collapsing frame, overwhelmed by physiological terror. The paralyzed figure hyperventilating before the wooden post is 32-year-old Louis Collard. Just 3 years prior, this man confidently orchestrated the murder of 27 Belgian teachers and shopkeepers near the River Sambre. 27 murdered civilians roughly equal the entire teaching staff of an average European school during that era. Those victims can no longer plead for their lives, while this current screaming triggers zero mercy from the soldiers. His local ambitions seamlessly merged with the occupation authority, turning him into a willing architect of regional terror. He traded his conscience for fleeting administrative authority, assuming his newly acquired power would last indefinitely. Now the inescapable reality of his impending execution forces his nervous system to shut down. The soldiers tighten their grip on their heavy service rifles, ignoring the desperate sounds. He hangs suspended between his escorts, drained of his former occupational arrogance. The squad raises their weapons. Who sheltered the weeping executioner in February 1946? His own wife hid him inside a freezing Innsbruck apartment. The man who destroyed 27 families had a loyal partner. Her name was Huguette. She washed his clothes. She shared his meals. Ice formed on the windows of their Austrian Alps hideout. They had no heating. The cold pierced through their coats. Huguette followed him without question as the Allied armies pushed across the European continent. She abandoned her past. She chose the life of a hunted fugitive. A mass murderer received total affection from his spouse. The population of Innsbruck reached roughly 95,000 people then. Finding two foreigners took months. But Belgian intelligence agents eventually crossed the border. They kicked down the apartment door. Why did Wallonia trust violent political radicals? Post-war unemployment made the party their only social lift. Long before the Alpine hideout came Ants, a gritty town. Here a dark new identity emerged. August 1915 brought Louis Collard here. Thick coal dust coated the narrow cobbled streets. World War I left deep psychological scars. Previous German occupation haunted the local population. Banks failed, factories closed. Desperate men had no steady work. Social instability ruled the broken neighborhoods. Young men desperately needed clear purpose. They craved order. A new political movement offered brotherhood. It was Rex. Christus Rex simply meant Christ the King. Leon de Grelle led this rising, angry faction. A magnetic leader. He started a small Catholic publishing house. Soon he built an authoritarian nationalist party. Fierce anti-communist rhetoric fueled their daily marches. Mussolini and Hitler provided the core model. Rex became a dedicated political tribe. Mass rallies felt like intense religious revivals. They printed their own daily propaganda newspapers. They offered an exclusive ideological community. Jobless youth found an angry, loyal brotherhood. Collard found his deep political identity here. Then came the May 1936 national elections. Election officials counted endless stacks of paper ballots. The growing piles proved the stunning victory. The old establishment realized their sudden defeat. 21 radical deputies took their parliament seats. Belgium held roughly 8 million citizens then. Radicalization spread. Rex secured 11.5% of the national vote. Hundreds of thousands of radicalized citizens formed the solid social base of the Christus Rex party. Officially, Louis Collard managed regional propaganda for the party. In reality, he directed a network of civilian informants orchestrating punitive operations for the secret police. By 1943, the loud political marches of Rex had mutated into the silent night raids of Formation B against former neighbors. When Leon de Grelle departed to join the Waffen-SS, Collard inherited sweeping control over the movement across occupied Belgium. Operating out of administrative offices in both Brussels and Charleroi, he transformed his local political ambitions into a tool of state terror. The mechanics of this authority relied upon compiling detailed lists of local resistance members and prominent political opponents. The Gestapo and the SD critically depended on these informants, as German officers could not simply blend into the dense French-speaking neighborhoods of Brussels. Collard provided the necessary eyes and ears on the ground, cultivating operational ties with German intelligence handlers. His personal paramilitary unit, Brigade B, fed these names directly to the occupation authorities, turning ordinary citizens into immediate targets for arrest and deportation. Every piece of intelligence gathered by these local collaborators seamlessly integrated into the Nazi surveillance apparatus. Ambitious local residents betrayed their own neighbors under the shadow of a foreign military occupation. The German army laid the foundation for this methodical terror rapidly during the spring of 1940. It took exactly 18 days. Teachers, shopkeepers, and a Catholic priest had zero connection to the underground resistance, yet they were the exact targets lined up against the wall. This newly acquired authority converted directly into 27 corpses at a brick wall in the town of Courcelles. Louis Collard and acting leader Victor Mattis issued the immediate order on August 18, 1944. Rexist militiamen swarmed the residential streets. They kicked open front doors in the middle of the night. Warrants did not exist. Armed squads dragged union members and local officials directly from their beds into the cold. The captives sat in total darkness, waiting for the dawn. The population of Courcelles hovered around 15,000 people in those days. The executioners and the victims recognized each other's faces. They shot their own neighbors. 27 civilians were killed in a single morning. As the sun finally rose, guards marched the surviving prisoners toward the firing line in small groups. The sharp crack of a rifle volley ripped through the morning air. This execution stood as the worst war crime committed by Belgian collaborators during the entire occupation. Allied forces were just weeks away from crossing the border. The front was approaching. But the shooting continued. Collard placed himself right at the center of the courtyard. He personally barked commands to the militiamen waiting by the wall. Why did the militia target random neighbors? We must rewind exactly 24 hours to August 17, 1944. The Courcelles execution order was not a military strategy, but a sudden spasm of panic following an ambush in Charleroi. Partisans intercepted a convoy, and the sharp sound of bullets piercing the metal of the automobiles echoed across the road. Oswald Engelben, the Rexist mayor, died instantly alongside his family. By the summer of 1944, the illusion of authority collapsed under the weight of the Normandy landings. Local administrators realized they were trapped between the advancing front lines and the internal resistance. Allied forces had already deployed hundreds of thousands of combat troops across northern France. Terrified loyalists faced the imminent loss of their stolen status. Blind revenge began. How did an administration capable of such terror emerge? For the guerrilla war in Charleroi to become reality, the state had to collapse 4 years earlier. The foundation was laid in 18 days. May 10, 1940. The invasion of Western Europe commenced under the plan Fall Gelb. Allied commanders expected a direct frontal assault across the northern plains. Instead, German armored columns pushed straight through the thick Ardennes forest. They breached a region considered impassable for tanks. The defensive lines disintegrated. On May 28, 1940, King Leopold III surrendered the army. 200,000 soldiers dropped their rifles. Belgium had a population of 8 million people. The military capitulation left every civilian trapped under direct foreign control. A heavy canvas bearing a black swastika rose against the sky, flying directly above the royal palace in Brussels. Daily routines shattered. Authorities restricted food supplies through strict ration cards. Armed patrols enforced nighttime curfews. The Gestapo requisitioned ordinary buildings. Officers moved wooden desks into brick houses on quiet residential streets. Work crews pasted bilingual propaganda posters across city walls, spreading directives in French and Flemish. The Foreign Command needed compliant locals to enforce order. A targeted recruitment campaign for native administrators began immediately. On September 4, 1944, British and American tanks rolled into Brussels. The entire occupation administration, built during the spring of 1940, disintegrated within hours. High-ranking figures like Leon de Grelle secured private flights to Germany and eventually sought asylum in Spain. There, dictator Francisco Franco provided him a comfortable sanctuary far from the tribunals. Meanwhile, lower-level collaborators faced a grueling physical retreat across hostile territories. Their escape route required navigating a broken continent while shedding the uniforms that once guaranteed their power. The distance from Brussels to Innsbruck exceeds 700 kilometers, marking a long path of panicked flight. They headed toward the Swiss border, hoping to cross into neutral territory, but guards firmly turned them away. Left without alternatives, the fugitives pushed deeper into the Austrian Alps. The former enforcers now experienced the very displacement they had inflicted upon their own citizens. Living under assumed identities, they hid in unfamiliar towns while Belgian courts passed death sentences in absentia. This retreat ended in February 1946, when intelligence agents raided a specific address in Innsbruck. The raid exposed their final hiding place, one modest apartment holding 20 Belgian SS men. Guards dragged a paralyzed Louis Collard across the frozen courtyard of the Charleroi barracks. He could not stand on his own feet. He wept openly against the wood. The military personnel bound his arms to the execution post with thick ropes. It was November 10, 1947. Military protocol demanded a public ritual of degradation before the firing squad could take aim. Soldiers stepped forward. They violently ripped the insignia and buttons from his heavy winter coat. The fabric tore. Officers read the death sentence aloud in the freezing air. They listed the charges of assassination and mass murder. Finally, a guard pinned a square of red cloth directly over his heart to guide the riflemen. Collard was just the beginning of the morning schedule. The military authorities brought 27 collaborators to the execution posts. Charleroi was a major industrial center in Wallonia. Its population stood at roughly 260,000 people during that period. For the region, this mass execution became the largest act of institutional retribution in the city's modern history. The tribunal established a precise, unyielding equation: 27 lives for 27 lives. The military court matched the number of executed men exactly to the number of civilians massacred at Courcelles 3 years prior. There was no margin for appeals. There were no pardons. The firing squad stood ready in the cold light. They held their rifles in line. The commanding officer raised his steel sword. The execution of the first group was set for the early morning. At exactly 7:36, the order fell. The rifles fired simultaneously. Collard slumped forward against the tight ropes. His body convulsed in the aftermath of the volley. He did not die from the initial impact. A priest stepped close to the post to administer the final absolution. A gendarmerie officer approached the bleeding man. He drew his service weapon from its leather holster. The sharp crack of a single pistol shot echoed against the brick walls of the barracks. The officer fired a bullet directly into Collard's skull. How did the former commander deceive the tribunal? Through staged amnesia and laughter. 18 months prior, on May 21, 1946, this same man sat confidently in the dock. The Salle Concordia was traditionally a civilian gathering space, but the state transformed it into an open social theater for thousands of residents. Post-war Belgium initiated over 300,000 investigations into wartime collaboration. This Charleroi tribunal became the largest war crimes trial in the nation's history. 97 defendants faced justice for the August 17, 1944 massacre. Louis Collard appeared before the judges designated as defendant number 55. The harsh lights reflected off the steel-rimmed spectacles sitting on his emaciated face. He leaned forward toward the microphone, rubbing his forehead to project confusion. Whenever questioned about his orders, he implemented a strategy of cynical forgetfulness. Courts across Europe frequently encountered this exact evasive tactic among former SS officers. He claimed his mind retained only chaotic fragments of the past, building a defense on the denial of physical reality. The grieving public anticipated some display of repentance for the burned homes. Instead, Collard laughed out loud when confronted with accounts of him carrying petrol cans. He smirked at the prosecutors, questioning how he could have committed the arson alone. The entire room watched a mass murderer treat his indictment as an absurd joke. But his performance failed to manipulate the judges or silence the survivors. Outside the doors, 147 citizens stood waiting for their turn to testify. 147 people. On August 3, 1946, the Charleroi War Council sentenced Louis Collard to death by firing squad. The smirk of Defendant 55 vanished the moment those citizens began approaching the stand. The judicial process lasted 2 full months. Local newspapers published the complete court transcripts every single day. The entire region relived the chronology of terror. Former collaborators turned against their commander. Jean Noverre testified under oath. He confirmed Collard personally ordered him to compile intelligence on Belgian Freemasons. This specific list fed directly into the assassination of Jules Hayernow, a prominent university director and politician. Cornered by these testimonies, Collard dropped his defense. He quietly admitted taking responsibility for the Courcelles massacre of August 18th. He chose the word reprisal. 27 dead civilians. The collective statements of the town dismantled his fabricated amnesia. That night, inside a solitary cell, the condemned man attempted suicide. He physically survived the blood loss. What remains of a man who traded the lives of his neighbors for power? An ink stroke in a judicial registry. The military tribunal verdict closed the narrative of the 32-year-old collaborator. Clerks recorded the names of the convicted executioners into official ledgers right next to their murdered victims. Louis Collard made a deliberate sequence of choices during the occupation, prioritizing political allegiance over human conscience. He elevated his own status above the survival of the people he shared a nation with. Today, gray dust settles on the cardboard folders holding the Charleroi trial transcripts inside the Belgian state archives. Every conscious decision he made demanded an eventual physical payment. That payment arrived on a frozen execution courtyard during a desolate November morning in 1947.